Now we'll tell you. But first, let's go back briefly to 1996. We're in the high school boys' locker room. Some chubby guy is standing under the shower, making faces to the music. His peers are giggling as they watch the whole spectacle. Meanwhile, in the school gym, the Graduate of the Year award ceremony is taking place. The local idol, Kelvin Joyner, better known by his nickname Golden Rocket, is called to receive the award. Stepping onto the field, the guy starts giving a motivational speech. But his TED Talk is interrupted by a strange incident. The chubby guy from the shower is thrown onto the field, barely dressed. The hall bursts out laughing, and Kelvin feels sorry for the poor guy. He gives him his bomber jacket and helps him cover up. Present day. Kelvin is no longer a star in the eyes of others. He works in an office, watching with envy as his colleagues get promoted, brushing off the dumb jokes of his open-plan office neighbor. He married his high school sweetheart, Maggie. During dinner with his wife, Kelvin says he doesn't want to go to the upcoming class reunion. Maggie gets upset. She had been preparing for a long time and chose a beautiful dress. Then the husband confesses that he's not ready for questions about his job. Everyone had predicted him to be at least a governor, but he became just an accountant. I didn't know that life with me was such a terrible disaster. The next day, Kelvin scrolls through his social media feed. Suddenly, he notices a friend request from some Bob Stone. The guy doesn't know who this is but accepts the request. Bob immediately suggests meeting up for a beer. Kelvin asks where they know each other from. When he realizes that Bob is the outcast from high school, he is speechless. Kelvin immediately agrees. Kelvin simply can't believe that the bulky guy in front of him is the same Robbie whom the whole school used to bully. The guys sit down for a beer, chat, and have fun. After a while, Bob goes to the bar for a refill, and some random dude tries to take his seat. Kelvin tries politely to explain to the stranger that the seat is taken, but the guy provokes a conflict. Bob returns and quickly settles the situation. Kelvin is shocked by what he just saw. Bob suggests they ride somewhere on the motorcycle, and they arrive at the school. While Kelvin indulges in pleasant memories, Bob is rather sad. He opens up to his new friend, saying that since that evening, he has never undressed in front of another person. Suddenly, their attention is drawn to a display case dedicated to the class of '96. It looks like an altar of Kelvin's achievements. A bunch of trophies, photos, and certificates. But none of it makes the guy happy. Feeling upset, he heads home and says goodbye to Bob. But Bob isn't in a hurry to let go of his new friend. Bob explains that recently he had some kind of mess with his payroll account. He says he could use Kelvin's professional help and insists on coming to his place. They don't manage to sort out the accounts because Bob spills beer on Kelvin's laptop. He asks if he can stay overnight and sleeps on the couch. In the morning, Kelvin goes down to the kitchen and hears a knock at the door. A woman at the door introduces herself as a CIA agent. Kelvin immediately turns Bob in, but the bulky guy is already gone without a trace. From Officer Harris, the guy learns that Bob is wanted for murder and treason. Kelvin begins to realize trouble is brewing and distances himself from Bob. However, the fugitive named him as his only contact in case of emergency. So Officer Harris informs Kelvin that from now on he will be a bait and heads to his office. Once in the office, Kelvin immediately hears his phone ringing. It's Bob calling. The guy says he's in big trouble and asks to meet urgently on the office stairs. The CIA team rushes to the specified place, but Bob is cleverer. Kelvin demands an explanation of what's going on, but Bob says nothing. He hands his friend a gun and, for some reason, sets fire to a tie hanging from the ceiling. Kelvin runs out of the office yelling. A fierce shootout ensues, during which Bob takes out almost all the pursuers. Bob and Kelvin nearly escape the clutches of the law enforcement, but a CIA group blocks their way by the elevators. Bob buys time with polite conversation. Then, "My time is up." Chaos erupts in the office, and Bob uses the moment to flee. The bulky guy shoots the panoramic window, jumps down with Kelvin, and lands right on an inflatable gorilla. In the car, Bob finally explains to his friend what's going on. According to him, 3 weeks ago, a criminal known as the Black Badger stole the keys to the American spy program and now plans to sell them to whoever pays the most at an auction. But Kelvin doesn't even want to listen. He asks to slow down and says he wants out of it because Bob is a criminal. Bob tells how it really happened. Bob and his partner Phil almost reached the Black Badger's lair, but just before the goal, the partner got stuck in an elevator with a bomb and died. Bob never managed to catch the criminal, and Phil's death was pinned on him. Kelvin sympathizes with his friend but still begs to be let home. Then Bob delivers the grim news. Officer Harris has probably already surrounded Kelvin's house, and now he won't get out easily. But their conversation is interrupted by an unexpected visit. While Bob sorts things out with the uninvited guest, Kelvin steals his motorcycle. He calls his wife and asks her not to come home but to meet him at their new psychotherapist's office. But on the way, Officer Harris detains him again. She convinces Kelvin that Bob is developing a mental disorder and that the Black Badger is actually Bob himself. Kelvin begins to believe the woman and accepts a panic button from her, which he is supposed to press when meeting Bob. Running late, Kelvin arrives at the family therapy session. "Hello, Kelvin. Damn it." To avoid putting Maggie at risk, Kelvin calms down and doesn't show that he knows Bob. They play some kind of circus with associations and role-playing games, but Kelvin can't stand it and throws a tantrum. His wife is angry and leaves. Kelvin almost presses the panic button, but Bob calms him down. He assures him that he doesn't have any encryption keys. To find them, they will need Kelvin's help. Strangely, the guy believes him and takes him to his acquaintance, an expert in international transactions. The acquaintance turns out to be Trevor, who humiliated Bob in front of the whole school 20 years ago. The man quickly gives the guys a transaction number and at first behaves very politely. He even apologizes for his behavior, but soon it becomes clear it's just another prank. And his character hasn't changed one bit. Kelvin is sure Bob will teach the old bully a lesson, but Trevor seems frozen. He simply leaves the office silently. Kelvin follows him out and gets a call from Harris. She demands to report his location and detain Bob until the patrol arrives. Outside, Bob tells Kelvin he was the only one who didn't bully him, and that's why he is his only friend he can trust. At this moment, Kelvin can't hold back and admits he just turned Bob over to the CIA. Harris interrogates Bob, but the man doesn't give in. Then she orders torture instruments to be brought, while Kelvin devises a plan to distract the guards. Kelvin gets the keys and sneaks into the interrogation room. The partners handcuff Harris to the table and escape. Bob asks if Kelvin still has the transaction number. Turns out that it's actually the geolocation of the deal. The friends enter the coordinates into a disposable phone and learn the meeting will take place in Boston. The partners head to a private airfield in search of a flying vehicle. While Kelvin distracts a local guard, Bob prepares the liner for flight. The friends finally reach the deal's location. Kelvin is wary because it's out in the open. He notices an entrance to an underground parking lot nearby and says the meeting will likely be held underground. Bob praises him for his quick thinking and suggests splitting up. In the parking lot, Bob sees a bunch of men led by the buyer. Meanwhile, Kelvin spots Harris at the parking entrance and decides she is the Black Badger. He tries to call Bob, but Bob doesn't answer. The guy runs down the stairs to warn his friend. But, after shooting the partner, Bob pulls a flash drive out of his pocket. Suddenly, Phil emerges from behind a pillar. The fake dead guy declares that he is the Black Badger, and he also has the access keys. The buyer's patience runs out. He demands the guy's hand over both flash drives. The former partners drop the drives on the floor, when suddenly a CIA team bursts into the parking lot. A fierce fight begins. Kelvin, who has come to his senses, picks up the flash drives from the floor and runs away. He is almost caught by the buyer's car, but Bob saves his friend just in time. Kelvin doesn't want to hear anything and runs to a nearby bridge. His solitude lasts only a few seconds. Soon Bob appears on his left and Phil on his right. Each begs Kelvin to believe them. A shootout erupts between Bob and Phil. Phil loses his weapon and Kelvin picks it up. Either carelessly or out of spite, Kelvin shoots Bob, and Phil orders the guy to hand over the keys. Kelvin tries to shoot him too, but the gun runs out of bullets. Finally, the truth comes out. Phil says Bob could never be the Black Badger because he's a sentimental weakling. But Phil is a smart guy. He faked his own death and fooled everyone. Being one step from death, Kelvin decides to pull his signature trick. That's enough to distract Phil. Bob takes advantage and throws him off the bridge. The friends forgive each other, hand the keys over to Harris, and head to the reunion. The guys arrive at the party by helicopter. Kelvin introduces Maggie to Bob and asks her forgiveness for not appreciating the simple happiness with his beloved. The trio enters the gym where the king and queen of the ball will be named any minute. Bob panics and almost runs away from the party, but Kelvin stops him. He hacked the voting system and arranged everything so that his friend wins the contest. Bob walks out of the crowd to loud applause. On the way, he meets Trevor, who starts mocking him again. But this time the bulky guy is not afraid. He knocks Trevor out with a punch and goes on stage. Bob says that 20 years ago he stood here completely defenseless, and everyone laughed at him. But now everything is different. He has a best friend who taught Bob not to be afraid to be himself. To the shock of everyone present, the guy strips off his clothes and stands completely naked in front of everyone. Months pass. Bob waits for Kelvin near his house while he says goodbye to his pregnant wife. He came to give his friend a memorable thing from the past and support him before his first day at the CIA.